So what are temperate grasslands? Temperate grasslands can be thought of as fields of grass, flowers, plants, and a few trees here and there. What is a limiting factor? A limiting factor can be simplified as a variable that helps determine how much of an organism there can be in an ecosystem. Many factors that encompass ecosystems affect the population of a species. To begin, the food in an ecosystem can determine the size of the population and how the animals affect each other in a community. When there is a lot of food in an ecosystem, the population will increase to its carrying capacity, which is how many organisms can live and house an ecosystem. When there is less food than a population needs to survive, the population will decrease through either starvation or by them killing and competing for the food. The changes in population with many of the organisms will either increase or decrease the amount of competition constantly interfering with the community. Secondly, disease is a factor that most of us are more aware of at this time because of COVID-19. The amount of disease in the environment changes the population by decreasing during periods of large occurrences of it through infection. Of course, during periods of low disease, the population will increase. The best example I can give of that is that thanks to the coronavirus, human population growth has slowed down because of the greater death rate. Human communities also adapted to the virus by distancing themselves from each other and wearing masks. Disease changes through both the population growth and of humanity. It changed both of those things. It also changed how the community interacts with each other. Unlike humans, animals don't distance themselves or wear masks, but due to the change in population, there are less conflicts in their community and it becomes more peaceful than before. Lastly, the amount of space in an ecosystem limits the amount of organisms that can live there because when there is limited space, that space can only have so much food and water for the organisms to survive. And when you try and portion the food, the resources based on their survival, you'll eventually run out of resources and the rest of the organisms will be forced to starve and die. Imagine trying to fit 20 elephants in a 4 meter by 10 meter box. The most you can fit is one, so that one will only figuratively survive. Those are only a few limiting factors in an ecosystem. There are many just as important, like how there are many ways to show a hierarchy in an ecosystem. One of which is a food chain, a chain of organisms to show which ones eat which. An example of a grassland food chain is shown in front of me, containing corn, an American bison, a coyote, and a grizzly bear. A similar way to show the hierarchy of an ecosystem is through a food web, a more accurate representation than the food chain. Food webs are show more organisms and show how each organism is related in their community by showing how the organisms interact with each other. Another way to show the relationship in a community, in an ecosystem, is to share it through an energy pyramid. The layers help demonstrate how the ecosystem functions. The producers show our wild oats, weeds, buffalo grass, and corn. The primary consumers are a layer above include white-tailed deer, bison, and a cow. Above that layer is the secondary consumers, entailed a wolf and a coyote. Above all of those animals, the tertiary consumer is the grizzly bear, the apex predator. How energy pyramids work is every time you move a layer up, you'll lose 90% of the energy. So by the time you get to the top, the tertiary consumer only gets a small fraction of the energy. But since the grizzly bear eats a variety of foods, it gets a mixed amount of energy from the rest of the organisms. Though the food is a very important factor in life, there are a few more lifeless factors to consider. These inanimate factors are called abiotic factors. Water is a great example. Though without life, water is still the most important thing in the world for life to exist. As you know, without water, you would die, and so would everything else. Water provides nutrients for all living things, but there are other factors to contribute to life. The sun is one of the main sources of energy to plant life. It gives energy to grow to a process called photosynthesis, in which plant turns sunlight into oxygen and glucose, another word known as sugar. Thanks to the plant life, primary consumers get to eat, and so do the rest of the animals in the kingdom, since the primary consumers can eat. There is one more main source of nutrients plants retrieve from: soil. It gives a soft ground for all living things, and provides nutrients to plants and fungi through the minerals and partially through the corpses. There are many relationships between organisms and their community. The one you've already seen before is predation, in which one organism eats another for food and nutrients. In the grasslands, one example would be a wolf eating a cow for its nutrients. Another type of relationship is called commensalism, in which one organism benefits and the other doesn't really care. An example I can give is the cattle egret. It eats bugs on animals like bison, getting nutrients from it, but the bison does not mind at all and continues to eat its food. There are, however, relationships in which both organisms benefit. In a cow's stomach, you'll find large amounts of bacteria that help the cow digest its meal. The bacteria gets to eat, and the cow can more easily digest its food. Those relationships are called mutualistic relationships. That's not the only one. There is a last one I have yet to talk about. It is called parasitism, in which one organism benefits and the other gains a loss or suffers or dies. One example is in a grassland is the brown-headed cowbird. It leaves its eggs in another bird's nest. The unknown bird nurses and feeds the bird instead of raising its own, causing the cowbird population to increase, while the host of the parasite population loses a potential population increase, and the host also loses its food in time, wasting it on the cowbird. The last thing I would like to talk about is the classification of two organisms, the grizzly bear and the American bison. The first animal is the grizzly bear, or Ursus arctos, with the domain Eukaryote and the kingdom Animalia, the phylum Chordate, and the order Carnivoria, the family of Ursidae, the genus of Ursus, and the species of Arctos. The second animal I would like to tell you about is the American bison, other known as my favorite, the bison. The American bison, like all animals, is eukaryote. The American bison is in the kingdom of Animalia, the phylum Chordate, and the class Mammalia, the order Arctiodactyla, the family Bovidia, the genus bison, and the species bison. Thank you for watching.